The phone call came at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was sitting in my modest apartment sipping coffee and reviewing quarterly reports for Phoenix Hospitality Group, my $2.8 billion empire that my family knew nothing about. "Emma, we need to talk." Dad's voice was stern, businesslike. "Come to the house. Now." I knew this wasn't good. Dad only used that tone when he was about to deliver what he considered important family decisions. The kind where everyone else had already been consulted except me. 20 minutes later, I walked into the familiar living room of my childhood home. Mom sat rigid on the leather sofa, her lips pressed into a thin line. Dad stood by the fireplace like he was addressing a board meeting. My younger sister Jessica lounged in the armchair, scrolling through her phone with that smirk she'd perfected since high school. "Sit down, Emma," Dad commanded, not looking at me. I remained standing. "What's this about?" "Your wedding." Mom's voice was ice cold. "We've made a decision." My heart started racing, but I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of decision?" Dad turned to face me, his jaw set. "We're not paying for this circus anymore." The words hit like a slap. "Excuse me." "You heard me." He crossed his arms. "This whole production you've planned, it's ridiculous. $75,000 for one day? The venue, the flowers, the photographer, it's all excessive." "We agreed on the budget months ago," I said quietly. Jessica finally looked up from her phone. "Yeah, well, that was before we realized how much money you were wasting on stupid stuff." "Like what?" "Like that dress," Mom interjected. $4,000 for something you'll wear once? And those centerpieces, who needs crystal and gold leaf at a wedding?" I took a deep breath. "I've been planning this for 8 months. Marcus and I." "Marcus," Dad interrupted with a sneer. "That's another problem. The guy works at a nonprofit. What kind of future is that? No ambition, no real income." "He's a good man." "Good doesn't pay bills," Mom added. "Maybe this is a sign you should reconsider the whole thing." My chest tightened. "You want me to call off my wedding?" "We want you to be realistic," Dad said. "Find someone who can actually afford the lifestyle you seem to expect. Someone with prospects." Jessica snorted. "Yeah, because living in that tiny apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda really screams high expectations." The room fell silent. I looked at each of their faces. Dad's stern disapproval, Mom's cold judgment, Jessica's amused contempt. These people had raised me, supposedly loved me, and now they were dismantling the most important day of my life like it was a failed business venture. "So what exactly are you saying?" I asked. Dad walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. "I've already called the venue. Canceled everything. The deposits are forfeited, but at least we're not throwing away the full amount." My stomach dropped. "You canceled my wedding venue?" "Our name was on the contracts," Mom said matter-of-factly. "Legally we had every right." "The caterer too," Jessica added helpfully. "And the photographer." "Oh, and the florist." I stared at them in disbelief. "You canceled my entire wedding without telling me?" "We're telling you now," Dad said. "Consider it a favor. You'll thank us later when you find someone more suitable." "Someone who can afford you," Mom repeated. The room spun slightly. 8 months of planning. The dress I'd fallen in love with. The photographer we'd interviewed 6 different candidates to find. The menu Marcus and I had spent hours perfecting. The flowers that reminded me of my grandmother's garden. All of it, gone. "I can't believe you did this," I whispered. "Believe it," Dad said. "And next time maybe think before you plan something so far beyond your means." I looked at my family one more time. Dad, the successful investment banker who'd built his reputation on calculated risks. Mom, who'd married him for his money and spent 30 years perfecting the art of looking down on people. Jessica, who'd never worked a day in her life but somehow felt qualified to judge everyone else's choices. "Understood," I said simply. The word hung in the air. They'd expected tears, arguments, pleading. Instead I gave them nothing. "Good," Dad said, clearly pleased with himself. "Now you can focus on finding someone more appropriate. Someone who won't embarrass the family," Mom added. I nodded and walked toward the door. "Emma," Jessica called out. "Don't be dramatic about this. It's for your own good." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical." And I left. The drive back to my apartment was surreal. 23 years old, MBA from Northwestern, secretly running a hospitality empire worth $2.8 billion. And my parents had just canceled my wedding because they thought I couldn't afford it. The irony was breathtaking. I'd built Phoenix Hospitality Group from nothing, starting with a single property I'd purchased at 19 with money I'd made developing apps in college. 4 years later, I owned 17 luxury venues across 3 states, including the Grandmont Estate, the exact venue where my wedding was supposed to take place. My parents had no idea their daughter owned the most exclusive wedding venue in the city. They thought I was just another struggling graduate living paycheck to paycheck. I'd let them think that. It was easier than explaining how I turned a coding hobby into a tech company, sold it for $12 million, and immediately invested everything into real estate. Easier than describing the 18-hour days I'd worked to build something from scratch while they assumed I was just figuring things out. But now they'd crossed a line. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in my car for a moment, thinking. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Hey babe, just confirmed final headcount with the caterer. 127 guests. Can't wait to marry you in 3 weeks. Red heart. My heart broke a little. Marcus had no idea what had just happened. He was probably at his office right now, excited about our future, completely unaware that my family had just blown up our wedding. I needed to call him, but first I had a few other calls to make. I dialed my assistant's number. Sarah, it's Emma. I need you to pull the Grandmont contracts immediately. The Grandmont Estate? Your wedding venue. Yes. And I need you to review the cancellation policies we have in place for deposits. There was a pause. Emma, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I just need to understand our options for unusual circumstances. Of course. I'll have everything ready in an hour. Thank you. My next call was to my head of legal. David, it's Emma. Hypothetical question. If someone canceled a booking at one of our venues using forged authorization, what would our legal recourse be? Well, that would be fraud. We'd be looking at potential criminal charges, plus civil damages. Why? Just curious about our protections. Can you send me the specific statutes? Absolutely. Emma, you sound stressed. Is Phoenix Hospitality facing some kind of legal challenge? Nothing like that. Just being thorough. After I hung up, I sat in my car and allowed myself exactly 60 seconds to feel the full weight of what had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the casual cruelty of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Then I got out of the car and went upstairs to plan my response. The next morning I was reviewing property reports when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Emma. Emma, what the hell is going on? It was Dad and he was screaming. Good morning to you too, I said calmly. The venue just called me. They're saying they can't refund our deposits because the owner, personally canceled our refund. They're saying you canceled it. I took a sip of my coffee. That's interesting. Interesting? Emma, this is $7,500 we're talking about. They're saying the owner specifically requested that the Martinez family receive no refund under any circumstances. Don't me. What did you do? Did you call them and complain? Did you cause some kind of scene? I didn't cause any scene, Dad. Then why are they saying this? The venue manager kept talking about direct orders from ownership and non-negotiable policies and, Emma, what the hell did you tell them? I leaned back in my chair. Through my office window, I could see the Grandmont Estate in the distance, its elegant grounds sprawling across 40 acres of pristine lakefront property. I didn't tell them anything they didn't already know, I said. That's not an answer. Emma, you need to fix this right now. Call them back and straighten this out. I don't think I can do that. What do you mean you can't? The owner's decision is final. There was a long pause. Emma, how do you know what the owner decided? Lucky guess. This isn't funny. We need that money back. Do you have any idea how much $7,500 is? I almost laughed. Dad was having a breakdown over $7,500 while sitting 3 miles away from my corporate headquarters, where I'd signed a $340 million acquisition deal just last week. It's probably not that much money to the owner, I said. I imagine they make that in about 6 minutes. Emma, what are you talking about? How could you possibly know? His voice cut off abruptly. Dad? You still there? Emma. His voice had changed. Quieter now, uncertain. Emma, what's the name of the company that owns the Grandmont estate? Why do you ask? Just tell me. Phoenix Hospitality Group. Silence. Dad. Emma. Emma, what's your last name? Legally, it's still Martinez. But professionally, I go by Emma Phoenix. The phone was so quiet I thought he'd hung up. Dad, are you Emma Phoenix? You're Emma Phoenix. That's right. The Emma Phoenix? The one who built. Oh my God. Oh my God. I heard him calling to Mom in the background. Margaret. Margaret, get in here right now. What's wrong, Richard? Mom's voice was distant but audible. Emma's Emma Phoenix. What are you talking about? Emma Phoenix. The businesswoman. The one who bought the Riverside Mall. The one who owns half the venues in the city. That's our Emma. I heard Mom gasp. Emma. Dad's voice was back, shaky now. Emma, sweetheart, there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Yes. A huge misunderstanding. We had no idea you were so successful. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. But Emma, we assumed. You assumed I was a failure. Not a failure. Just struggling. Like most people your age. Most people my age don't own $2.8 billion in real estate assets. I heard something crash in the background. Probably Mom fainting. Emma, listen to me very carefully. Dad's voice had shifted into his business mode. We can fix this. We can call the venue back and... The venue you already canceled? Yes, we can uncancel it. We can reinstate everything. The whole wedding. With what money? What do you mean? Well, you said you couldn't afford it. That it was beyond your means. That I needed to find someone who could afford me. Emma, that was before we knew. Before you knew I could pay for it myself? Yes. Exactly. I stood up and walked to my window. Down below, I could see the Grandmont Estates event coordinator setting up for a corporate retreat. My corporate retreat. Dad, let me ask you something. If I were still just regular Emma, living in my apartment and driving my old Honda, would you have reconsidered? Pause. Would you have called me this morning and said, you know what, Emma? We were wrong. We love you and want you to be happy regardless of money? Longer pause. Emma. Would you have apologized for humiliating me in front of Mom and Jessica? For canceling the most important day of my life without even discussing it with me first? Emma, please. The answer is no, Dad. You would have let me stay heartbroken and weddingless, and you would have felt good about it. Responsible. Like you taught me a valuable lesson about living within my means. That's not. We were trying to help. You were trying to control me. Just like you've always done. I heard Mom's voice in the background. Give me the phone. Emma, honey, it's Mom. Sweetheart, there's been a terrible miscommunication here. Has there? Yes. We had no idea about your business success. We're so proud of you. Are you proud of the business or proud of the money? Both. Emma, you're our daughter. We've always been proud. Yesterday you told me to find someone who could afford me. What changed? Well, now we know that I can afford myself? Silence. Mom, let me save you some time. I'm not reinstating the wedding. I'm not giving you your deposits back. And I'm not pretending this conversation never happened. Emma, you're being unreasonable. I'm being exactly as reasonable as you were yesterday. I heard Jessica's voice in the background. Is she serious? She's actually not giving us the money back. Put Jessica on the phone, I said. Emma, I don't think. Put her on. Fine. Here's Jessica. Hey, Emma. Jessica's voice was carefully neutral. So, this is weird. Hi, Jess. I had no idea you were like rich. Rich. I'm comfortable. Comfortable? Emma, you own half the city. Not half. Maybe 30%. This is insane. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would it have mattered? What do you mean? Yesterday you recorded my fiancé throwing my keys in a lake and posted it on social media. You called my wedding plans stupid and said I was wasting money on excessive things. Would you have done that if you'd known I was wealthy? Well, no, probably not. So you're only nice to people who have money? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, Jess. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was poor. Now you want to be best friends because you found out I'm rich. Emma, come on. How many social media posts did you make mocking my cheap lifestyle? Pause. Emma. How many times did you joke about my car, my apartment, my job? That was just sister stuff. Put Dad back on. Emma, wait. Put him on. Dad's voice returned, subdued now. Emma, we need to talk about this face to face. No, we don't. Yes, we do. Your family. This is family business. Family doesn't cancel each other's weddings out of spite. It wasn't spite. We genuinely thought. He thought wrong. About everything. I heard him take a deep breath. Emma, what do you want? What will it take to fix this? There's nothing to fix, Dad. You made your position clear. I'm just respecting it. Our position was based on incomplete information. Your position was based on the assumption that I was worthless. Now that you know I'm not, you want to change the rules. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? Having your parents cancel your wedding because they think you're not good enough for their standards. Emma, please. I have to go. I have a board meeting. Emma, wait. What about Marcus? What about your wedding? I smiled. What about it? Are you still getting married? Of course. Where? Same place. Same date. Same time. But how can you? We canceled everything. You canceled the booking that was in your name. You never had any authority over the booking in mine. Silence. There are 2 contracts for the Grandmont estate on September 15th, I explained. The one you signed as the paying party and the one I signed as the property owner. You canceled yours. Mine is still active. You mean? I mean my wedding is happening exactly as planned. The only difference is that you're not invited. Emma. And neither is Mom. Or Jessica. You can't uninvite your family from your wedding. Watch me. I hung up. My phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. An hour later, Sarah knocked on my office door. Emma, there are some people here to see you. They say they're your family. I looked up from my laptop. Tell security to escort them off the property. Are you sure? Positive. 20 minutes after that, my personal phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Babe, your dad just called me. He's very upset. He says there's been some kind of family emergency about the wedding. Should I be worried? I called him immediately. Marcus, hi. Emma, what's going on? Your dad sounded like he was having a breakdown. It's a long story. Can you come over tonight? I need to tell you something. Of course. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'll explain everything. That evening I told Marcus the whole story. About Phoenix Hospitality Group. About the $2.8 billion empire I'd built in secret. About my family's betrayal and their frantic attempts to backtrack once they learned the truth. He listened without interrupting, his expression cycling through confusion, amazement, and finally anger. They canceled our wedding because they thought you were poor? He said finally. Essentially, yes. And now they want back in because they found out you're wealthy? That's the general idea. He shook his head. Emma, that's horrible. I'm sorry I never told you about the business. I wanted to be sure you loved me for me, not for what I could provide. Are you kidding? I'm not upset about the money. I'm upset about how they treated you. He took my hands. Emma, you're getting married in 3 weeks. You should have your family there. They made their choice. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Marcus. This was who they really are when they think no one important is watching. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to marry you at the Grandmont estate, surrounded by people who actually care about us. I want to start our life together without the toxic influence of people who only value me when I can benefit them. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning I drafted a formal letter to my family. It was delivered by courier at 9 a.m. sharp. Dear Dad, Mom, and Jessica. Thank you for clarifying your feelings about my life choices and my value as a family member. Your decision to cancel my wedding without consultation has saved me years of wondering whether you truly supported my happiness or simply tolerated it when convenient. Please consider this my formal notice that you are no longer invited to participate in my wedding or any future life events. This decision is final and non-negotiable. For the record, I built Phoenix Hospitality Group from nothing while living in that tiny apartment you all mocked. I worked 18-hour days for 4 years to create something meaningful while you assumed I was simply failing to meet your standards. The fact that you now want to celebrate my success, after trying to sabotage my happiness, tells me everything I need to know about your character. Marcus and I will be married as planned on September 15th. We will build our life together surrounded by people who value integrity over wealth and love over status. I wish you well in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Emma Phoenix, CEO, Phoenix Hospitality Group. The wedding was perfect. Marcus and I exchanged vows on the terrace overlooking the lake, surrounded by 127 people who genuinely cared about our future. My college roommate Sarah served as maid of honor. Marcus's brother Jake was his best man. The flowers were exactly what I'd dreamed of, white roses and baby's breath that reminded me of my grandmother's garden. During the reception, as I danced with my new husband under lights strung between ancient oak trees, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years around my family: pure, uncomplicated joy. My phone, tucked away in the bridal suite, had 47 missed calls and 23 voicemails from various family members. I deleted them all without listening. 6 months later, I received a formal apology letter from Dad. It was 3 pages long and mentioned my impressive business acumen 14 times. He requested a meeting to discuss our family's future relationship. I sent back a single sentence: "Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt." A year after that, Jessica reached out through LinkedIn, asking if Phoenix Hospitality Group had any entry-level marketing positions available. The message included a lengthy explanation about how much she'd grown as a person, and how sorry she was for not recognizing my incredible achievements sooner. I forwarded her resume to our HR department with a note: "Please file under Do Not Hire." Today Marcus and I live in a beautiful home overlooking the lake, about 10 minutes from the Grandmont estate. We host dinner parties for friends who knew us when we were just a nonprofit worker and a girl with a laptop, building dreams in a tiny apartment. Sometimes I'll drive past my parents' house on the way to a business meeting. Their cars are older now, their lawn less perfectly maintained. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that Dad's investment firm has struggled since the market downturn. Mom has started working part-time at a boutique. I feel no satisfaction in their struggles, but I feel no guilt about their absence from my life either. They taught me an invaluable lesson about unconditional love. It's only unconditional if it doesn't depend on your bank account, your career success, or your ability to meet someone else's definition of worth. My wedding was exactly the circus they said it was: a beautiful, joyful celebration of 2 people who chose each other without conditions. And I paid for every penny of it myself.
The moment I pulled into my driveway and saw Patricia standing in my garage with a stack of bills in her hand, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. My mother-in-law had that particular smile she wore when she believed she'd done something exceptionally clever, the kind that made my stomach tighten with dread. "Victoria," she called out cheerfully, waving the money like a trophy. "Perfect timing. I have wonderful news." I stepped out of my Honda Civic slowly, scanning the garage. The space where my project car usually sat was conspicuously empty. Just an oil stain on the concrete and the faint smell of motor oil lingering in the air. "Where's the Cobra?" I asked quietly, though I already suspected the answer. Patricia's smile widened. "I sold that junky old car for you. Got $3,000 cash, which is probably more than that rust bucket was worth. You needed something more practical anyway, honey. A woman your age driving around in some beat-up sports car from the 60s. It was embarrassing. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt sideways. I stared at the empty space where I'd spent the last 4 years of my life meticulously restoring a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427. Not just any Cobra, but one of only 348 ever made. A car I'd purchased as a rusted shell and rebuilt from the ground up with my own hands. "You sold it," I repeated, my voice steady despite the hurricane building in my chest. "For your own good," Patricia said, smoothing her perfectly styled gray hair. "Mark agrees with me. You've been wasting too much time in this garage playing with car parts instead of focusing on more appropriate hobbies. Maybe now you'll take up something more suitable, like gardening or cooking." I walked closer, noting the way she held the cash possessively against her chest. $3,000 for a car that had just been appraised at $400,000. "Who did you sell it to?" I asked. "Some young man who answered my Craigslist ad. Such a sweet boy. Said he'd been looking for a project car just like this one. I told him it needed a lot of work, but he seemed excited about it." She beamed with satisfaction. "I even threw in all those expensive tools cluttering up the garage." My tools. My grandfather's tools. The Snap-on collection worth more than most people's cars. Accumulated over 30 years of professional racing and restoration work. Tools I'd inherited when he passed, along with his knowledge and his passion for automotive engineering. "Patricia," I said carefully, "did you happen to keep any documentation from the sale?" "Of course I did. I'm not careless." She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her purse. "Here's the bill of sale. Everything's perfectly legal." I took the paper with steady hands, though inside I was calculating just how monumentally she'd destroyed something irreplaceable. The bill of sale was handwritten on notebook paper, signed with barely legible names. No title transfer, no proper identification recorded. "This young man," I said, "did he show you his driver's license? Get his address?" Patricia waved dismissively. "He paid cash. That's all that matters." "Really, Victoria, you should be thanking me. Now you can buy something sensible with that money. Maybe a nice set-in." I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my pocket. "You know what, Patricia? You're absolutely right. Thank you for taking care of this for me." The confusion that flickered across her face was almost worth the devastation. She'd expected an argument, tears, anger. Instead, I was giving her exactly what she wanted: gratitude and submission. "Well," she said, somewhat deflated by my response, "you're welcome. I just want what's best for you, dear. Mark will be so pleased when he gets home from his business trip." Mark, my husband of 6 years, who'd given his mother a key to our house for emergencies and never quite managed to set appropriate boundaries. Mark, who thought my hobby was cute, but didn't really understand why I spent my weekends covered in grease instead of shopping or getting my nails done. "I'm sure he will be," I said, pulling out my phone. "Patricia, would you mind waiting here for just a moment? I need to make a quick call." She nodded, still counting the bills with obvious satisfaction. "Take your time, dear. I'll just tidy up this garage a bit while you're handling whatever business you need to." I walked to the far corner of the garage, where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest, and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Detective Martinez, this is Victoria Chen. I need to report a theft." "Victoria? What happened?" Detective Carmen Martinez had been a friend since college, back when we were both struggling through our respective programs. She in criminal justice, me in mechanical engineering. She knew about my work, my reputation in the vintage racing community, and the value of what I'd been building. "Someone sold my Cobra without my permission," I said quietly, glancing back at Patricia, who was now rearranging my remaining tools with the confidence of someone who'd never held a wrench in her life. "The 67? The one you've been restoring for Barrett Jackson?" "That's the one." Carmen's whistle was low and sympathetic. "Jesus, Victoria. Who did it?" "My mother-in-law. She had access to the garage and thought she was doing me a favor by getting rid of my junk car for $3,000. There was a long pause. $3,000? For a numbers matching 427 Cobra. Apparently, she listed it on Craigslist as a project car that needed work. That's got to be the most expensive mistake in automotive history. What do you need from me? I've got the buyer's information from the bill of sale, but it's pretty sparse. Can you run what I have and see if we can track down where my car went? Absolutely. Text me everything you've got. And Victoria? I'm sorry. I know what that car meant to you. I glanced at Patricia, who was now trying to organize my socket sets by color rather than size. Thanks, Carmen. I'll send you the details now. After ending the call, I typed out the buyer's information, what little there was, and sent it to Carmen. Then I walked back to where Patricia stood, her hands on her hips, surveying the garage like a general reviewing conquered territory. All taken care of, I said pleasantly. Now, why don't you head home? Mark should be back from Chicago tomorrow evening, and I'm sure you'll want to tell him all about your successful sale. Of course. She gathered her purse and the cash, practically glowing with self-satisfaction. And remember, this is really for the best. You'll see. After she left, I stood alone in the garage, staring at the empty space where my Cobra had lived. 4 years of work, 4 years of research, of hunting down original parts, of learning welding techniques from YouTube videos, of rebuilding that 427 big block engine by hand. 4 years of connecting with my grandfather's memory through every bolt I turned and every panel I straightened. Patricia saw junk. I saw art. The next morning, Carmen called with news. The name on the bill of sale is fake, she said without preamble. David Johnson, but the phone number doesn't exist, and there's no David Johnson at the address listed. Professional buyer? That's what I'm thinking. Someone who knows to scout Craigslist for undervalued classics, uses fake information, and probably flips them quickly through auction houses or private dealers. I leaned back in my office chair, staring out the window of the engineering firm where I worked as a senior consultant. So my car is probably already gone. Maybe not. I've got some contacts in the classic car world. Let me make some calls, see if anyone's heard about a Cobra suddenly appearing on the market. Thanks, Carmen. I owe you. Just promise me that when this is over, you'll let me take a ride in whatever car you build next. That afternoon, as I sat in a client meeting reviewing stress analyses for a new bridge design, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Mom told me about the car. Probably for the best. Maybe now we can use the garage for storage like normal people. I stared at the message for a long moment, then turned my phone face down and returned my attention to the meeting. Some conversations were better had in person. Mark arrived home the next evening in his usual flurry of activity. Suitcase dropped in the entryway, tie loosened, already talking about his successful presentations in Chicago before he'd even properly said hello. Victoria, you should have seen the client's face when I showed them our cost projections, he said, loosening his tie. They practically signed the contract on the spot. That's wonderful, I said from the kitchen, where I was preparing dinner. How was your flight? Delayed, of course, but first class makes everything bearable. He wandered into the kitchen and kissed my cheek absently. Mom told me about the car situation. I have to say, I'm relieved. That thing was becoming an obsession. I continued stirring the pasta sauce, my movements calm and measured. Is that how you saw it? Come on, Vic. You spent every weekend in that garage. It was like being married to a mechanic. He laughed, clearly not noticing the tension in my shoulders. Now we can actually use the space for something practical. Maybe set up a home gym or create some proper storage. Your mother sold my car without my permission. I said quietly. She was trying to help. You know how she is, always thinking about what's best for family. He opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. Besides, $3,000 isn't bad for something that old. We can put it toward a nice vacation. I turned to face him, studying the man I'd married. Mark was handsome in a conventional way, tall, well-dressed, successful in his sales career. But standing in our kitchen, casually dismissing 4 years of my work as a minor inconvenience, he looked like a stranger. That car was worth $400,000, I said. Mark nearly choked on his beer. What? It was a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427, one of 348 ever made. I'd been restoring it to museum quality for the Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale. The color drained from his face. You never told me it was worth that much. You never asked. In 6 years of marriage, you never once asked me about the technical aspects of what I was doing. Never inquired about the value. Never showed any interest beyond complaining that I spent too much time working on it. But $3,000. Mom said it was just an old project car. Your mother committed theft. She sold property that didn't belong to her for a fraction of its value to a buyer who gave false information. Mark set down his beer with shaking hands. Can we get it back? I don't know. The police are investigating, but the buyer used a fake name and address. Professional car thieves often use Craigslist to find exactly these kinds of opportunities. Expensive classics being sold by people who don't know their value. Oh God, what are we going to do? For the first time since I'd come home to find Patricia counting her cash, I smiled. Not the polite, controlled smile I'd been wearing for the past 2 days, but something colder. We are not going to do anything, Mark. I am going to continue working with the police to recover my property. You are going to have a very difficult conversation with your mother about boundaries and legal consequences. The next morning brought a call from Carmen that changed everything. I found your car, she said, excitement clear in her voice. I was in my office, but I immediately closed the door and sat down heavily. Where? Scottsdale. A private collector named James Morrison bought it from a dealer yesterday. Paid $250,000, which means someone made a very nice profit flipping your Cobra. $250. It was worth $400 fully restored. The dealer probably told him it needed work. But here's the good news. Morrison is a legitimate collector, not a flipper. When I explained the situation, he was horrified. He's willing to cooperate fully. What does that mean? It means we can prove the chain of theft. Morrison has documentation from the dealer. The dealer has records from the original buyer, your fake David Johnson. And we have Patricia's bill of sale. It's a clear case of receiving stolen property. I leaned back in my chair, finally allowing myself to breathe. So we can get it back. We can get it back. Morrison's insurance will cover his loss. The dealer is already cooperating to avoid criminal charges, and we're working with Scottsdale PD to trace the money trail. How long? Could be a few weeks for all the paperwork, but your car is being held as evidence. It's not going anywhere. That evening, I called a family meeting. Mark sat across from me at our dining room table, looking haggard and pale. Patricia arrived fashionably late, still carrying herself with the confidence of someone who believed she'd done a good deed. I don't understand why we need a formal meeting, she said, settling into her chair with a slight huff. I already explained everything to Mark. I sold that old car for a very reasonable price. Patricia, I said calmly, I need you to understand something very important. That car you sold was worth $400,000. She blinked, Don't be ridiculous, Victoria. It was just an old. It was a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427. One of the rarest and most valuable muscle cars ever made. I've spent 4 years restoring it to concours condition. Patricia's confident expression flickered. That's impossible. It looked like junk. That's because restoration is a process. What you saw as rust and primer was actually a car that had been completely disassembled, with every component rebuilt or restored to original specifications. I pulled out my tablet and opened the photo album I'd been keeping throughout the restoration. This is what it looked like when I started. The first photo showed the Cobra as I'd found it. A rusted shell with no engine, no interior, sitting on blocks in a barn in Arizona. Patricia looked at it dismissively. See? Junk. I swiped to the next photo. This is after I'd media blasted the body and begun bodywork. The shell gleamed with primer. Every line clean and true. Another swipe. The engine rebuild. My grandfather's tools spread across the workbench. The 427 big block torn down to individual components. Each piece cleaned and measured and restored. Patricia's expression grew less certain with each image. The interior restoration. Hand-stitched leather seats. Original gauges rebuilt and recalibrated. A dashboard that looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line in 1967. The final assembly. Everything coming together, chrome gleaming, paint flawless. And this, I said, showing her the final photos, is what you sold for $3,000. The completed Cobra sat in our garage, every surface perfect, every detail authentic. It looked like it had been transported through time from the Shelby factory, untouched by the decades. Patricia's face had gone ashen. I had no idea. The young man who bought it wasn't a sweet boy looking for a project car, I continued. He was a professional car thief who uses Craigslist to find exactly these situations. Valuable cars being sold by people who don't recognize their worth. Car thief? Mark's voice cracked. The name and address he gave were fake. The police are investigating, but he's probably done this before. Take advantage of family disputes, estate sales, or well-meaning relatives who think they're helping. Patricia was staring at the photos, her mouth slightly open. $400,000? That's what it was worth. The police have found it, by the way. A collector in Scottsdale bought it from a dealer for $250,000. He's cooperating with the investigation. So we can get it back? Patricia asked hopefully. I can get it back, I corrected. But there's something else you need to understand. What you did was theft. You sold property that didn't belong to you. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case for criminal charges. The silence that followed was profound. Patricia looked from me to Mark, then back to the photos on my tablet. Criminal charges, she whispered. Theft of property over $100,000 is a first-degree felony in this state. The mandatory minimum sentence is 2 years in prison. Mark buried his face in his hands. Mom, what did you do? I was trying to help, Patricia said, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. I thought it was just taking up space. You thought you knew better than I did about my own possessions, I said quietly. You decided that my interests and hobbies were inappropriate and took it upon yourself to fix my life according to your standards. Patricia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay you back. With what money? You have $3,000. The car was worth $400,000. We'll figure something out, Mark said desperately. Maybe we can take out loans. Or, Mark, I said, my voice firm enough to cut through his panic. I want you to be very clear about something. Your mother committed a felony. She stole property worth more than most people's houses. This isn't something you can fix with good intentions and a payment plan. Over the next 2 weeks, as the police investigation proceeded and the legal machinery ground into motion, I watched my family dynamic shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. Mark, faced with the reality of his mother's actions and their consequences, began to see our relationship differently. He'd spent years minimizing my interests and supporting his mother's interference because it was easier than confronting the family dynamics he'd grown up with. Now, forced to acknowledge that my hobby was actually a sophisticated technical skill worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, he was struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he'd married with the expert craftsperson I'd always been. I never realized, he said one evening as we sat in the kitchen. I mean, I knew you were good with cars, but I didn't understand. You didn't want to understand, I replied. It was easier to dismiss it as a quirky hobby than to recognize that I might have expertise in something you knew nothing about. The legal resolution came faster than I'd expected. Morrison, the collector in Scottsdale, was indeed everything Carmen had said, horrified by the situation and eager to cooperate. The dealer who'd sold him the car agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. The money trail led back to the original thief, who turned out to be part of a larger operation targeting classic cars. Patricia, faced with the possibility of prison time and the reality of what she'd destroyed, accepted a plea agreement. 5 years probation, restitution payments, and community service. But the damage to our family relationships was permanent. Mark and I entered counseling, but it became clear that this incident had revealed fundamental incompatibilities we'd both been avoiding. He needed a wife who fit his image of conventional success, someone whose achievements complemented his rather than challenging his understanding of the world. I needed a partner who could respect my expertise and interests even when they fell outside his experience. 6 months after Patricia sold my car, Mark and I signed divorce papers. It was amicable, all things considered. He kept the house with its empty garage. I took my tools, the ones that hadn't been sold, and moved to a small place outside the city with a 2-car garage and room to work. The Cobra was returned to me in perfect condition, apparently none the worse for its adventure in theft and recovery. Morrison had stored it properly and even had his own mechanic perform a full inspection to ensure no damage had occurred during transport. But I'd lost the desire to finish that particular project. Too much had happened, too many associations had been tainted. Instead, I sold it myself, properly this time, through Barrett Jackson, with full documentation and provenance. It brought $420,000 at auction. With that money, I'd bought something I'd always dreamed of but never thought I could afford, a 1970 Plymouth Cuda that had been languishing in a barn for 30 years. Not as rare as the Cobra, but more personally meaningful. My grandfather had owned one just like it, had taught me to drive in one just like it. This time, though, I was building it for myself. Not for auction, not for investment, just for the pure joy of taking something broken and making it beautiful again. On weekends, I work in my garage with the doors open, music playing, tools spread across the workbench exactly the way my grandfather taught me. Neighbors stop by sometimes, curious about the old car taking shape under my hands. Some of them are surprised to find a woman doing the work, but most are just impressed by the craftsmanship. Mark sends occasional texts, usually on holidays or anniversaries. He's dating someone new, he tells me, someone who appreciates the finer things in life. I always text back politely, wishing him well. Patricia and I don't speak at all anymore. That's probably for the best. Last month, Carmen stopped by to see the coupe's progress. She ran her hands over the freshly painted panels, admiring the deep plum metallic that seemed to glow even in the fluorescent garage lighting. "You know," she said, "I think this one's going to be even better than the Cobra." I smiled, wiping grease from my hands with an old shop rag. Different goals this time. The Cobra was about proving I could do museum-quality work. This one's about remembering why I fell in love with cars in the first place. "And how's that going?" I looked at the CUDA, still months away from completion, but already showing the promise of what it would become. Every curve was perfect, every component chosen with care, every detail a reflection of decades of accumulated knowledge and skill. "Better than I expected," I said. "Turns out, when you're building something for yourself, instead of for other people's approval, the work is a lot more satisfying." Carmen laughed. "Sounds like you learned more than just automotive repair from this whole experience." Maybe I had. Maybe sometimes it takes someone else trying to steal your dreams to help you realize what those dreams actually mean to you. And maybe, sometimes the thing that looks like the worst betrayal becomes the catalyst for the life you were always meant to live.
The noise of Alex's voice cut through the clinking of dishes like a sharp knife. "Alara, bring me some tea now." I paused, my hand in soapy water. "Wait, I'm doing the dishes." "What?" His voice was full of disbelief and impatience. "Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders?" "But," I started, but he cut me off. "What a useless wife you are. Make me some sweet coffee, please." It was Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, speaking from the living room. She was eating a slice of cake she'd taken from the fridge, her eyes glinting with spite. I sighed, looking at the pile of dishes. "There are so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, useless wife." Alex's words hit like a whip, each one stinging. I was Alara, a 28-year-old working mother feeling trapped in a life that felt more like a prison than a home. I got married at 23, hoping for love and companionship. Instead, I found myself stuck with Alex and his demanding mother. Our 4-year-old son was my only source of joy in a bleak world. We lived in Alex's parents' house, a decision I had to accept under the pretense of taking care of Mrs. Whitmore after my father-in-law passed away. At first, I felt sorry for her, thinking she was grieving, but soon I realized I was just a pawn in her cruel game of domestic control. No matter how much I cooked, cleaned, or worked, it was never enough. My efforts were always met with scorn. My meals were either left untouched or harshly criticized. "The stir-fry is so half-hearted," Mrs. Whitmore would sneer. "Cook it properly from scratch." "I'm busy and can only make simple things," I'd say, trying to sound calm. "That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law," she'd snap. "Cook from scratch." "Why don't you cook then? You're a good cook, right?" I dared to ask once, immediately regretting it. "Why would I do housework when you're here?" Her response was cold and dismissive. "Are you out of your mind?" Their cruelty got worse over time. They stopped talking to me altogether, as if I were a ghost in my own home. My presence, once just unappreciated, now felt completely invisible. 5 years passed in this suffocating atmosphere. Alex and I turned 35 and 33, respectively. Our son grew up, but the heavy atmosphere in the house didn't change. My mother-in-law, now 63, seemed to enjoy my unhappiness. One evening, as I walked home from work, I felt a heavy realization sink in. My life seemed meaningless. To them, I was like a shadow, unnoticed and ignored. The only person who seemed to see me was my son. The idea of losing even that little bit of recognition was too much to bear. When I got home, I started cooking right away, trying to push away the sadness. I made mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork, hoping to make our dinner feel normal. "Bring me the mayo," Alex suddenly commanded, breaking his long silence. "Sure, here you are," I replied, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in ages weren't thankful or conversational, just another command. It was too much, the final straw. I couldn't tolerate it anymore. The evening got worse when Mrs. Whitmore said, "Clean the toilet." "What? Right now?" I couldn't believe it. "Yes, right now," she insisted, her voice full of bitterness. I couldn't hold back my frustration. "Don't say such things while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your heart," she hissed, and our argument quickly escalated, with Alex joining in, demanding. I apologized to his mother, but stood my ground for the first time in years. The conflict reached its peak, and I made a decision. I needed to get out of this toxic situation, for my son's sake as well as my own. I went to my room determined. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and handed them to Alex. He was shocked, but I felt nothing but determination. "I'm filing these," I said firmly. As I faced my husband's surprised expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to take control of my life. In the days after I declared my intention to divorce, there were a lot of angry looks and hurtful words, but in the middle of it all, I felt a strange sense of freedom. One evening, as I served dinner, Mrs. Whitmore looked at the meal with disgust. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I held back my frustration, focusing on my son's smile. "Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight." Alex jumped in, sarcastic. "Oh, now suddenly you're the perfect mother, huh? What a joke." I could feel anger rising, but I stayed calm. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son." Mrs. Whitmore scoffed. "Don't act like you're better than us. You're just a nuisance in this house." The tension at the table was thick. Alex's insults kept coming. "So, Alara, have you even thought about how you'll manage after the divorce? You can barely handle running a household, let alone your own life." I looked him in the eye. "I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." His smirk faded slightly, a hint of unease crossing his face. Mrs. Whitmore quickly stepped in. "Don't be ridiculous. You rely on us more than we rely on you." The conversation shifted to money, a topic they usually avoided. "You know, without my paycheck, this household would struggle," I said, more to myself than to them. Mrs. Whitmore scoffed. "We'll manage. We don't need your charity." But Alex's silence said it all. He knew the truth. Without my income, they would be in trouble. In the following days, their behavior became more unpredictable. Mrs. Whitmore would switch between trying to persuade me to stay and hurling insults when I resisted. Alex, meanwhile, seemed lost, his confident demeanor fading as the reality of his financial reliance on me sank in. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them that sent shivers down my spine. "Leaving her is not an option," Alex whispered angrily. "We rely on her money." Mrs. Whitmore's response was chillingly calculated. "Don't fret, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable she won't even think about leaving." Hearing their true intentions shocked me. They didn't care about me or our son. It was all about control and money. That night, lying in bed, a plan began to form. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. But not with arguments. I would hit them where it hurt most, their pride and their wallets. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman. "I want a divorce, and I want to ensure they don't get more than they deserve," I told her. She nodded firmly. "We'll make sure of that. You've been the main provider, right? We'll use that." With each passing day, my determination only grew stronger. I started keeping records of everything. The insults, the financial tricks, even the smallest annoyances. It was time to make them face the music. They needed to see the consequences of their actions. As I gathered evidence, I felt a sense of strength. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. The shadows of disrespect were fading away, and in their place, a new beginning was emerging. As the divorce process started, the tension at home grew worse. But with each passing day, my fear faded, replaced by determination. One evening, Mrs. Whitmore tried a different approach. "Alara dear, why don't we forget all this unpleasantness? You know we're family," she said, but her words were dripping with insincerity. I held her gaze steady. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me." Alex, who had been silent, scoffed. "Oh, now you're the victim. You're not as innocent as you act." I felt anger rising, but I stayed calm. "I'm not pretending anything, Alex. I'm just not willing to be your punching bag anymore." The conversation shifted to money, as it often did. You think you can just take our son and go? How will you support him? Alex challenged. I smiled confidently. I've been supporting this family for years. I'll manage. Mrs. Whitmore's sneer twisted into her face. You're nothing without us. You'll come begging to return. But their words didn't affect me anymore. I knew my value and the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She outlined the plan clearly. We'll expose their financial dependence on you. It'll be crucial in the custody battle and dividing assets. I nodded, feeling validated. The law was backing me, and I was ready to stand up for myself. At home, the tension reached its peak. Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to undermine me became more desperate. You think you're clever, she spat one evening, but you're just abandoning your family. I looked her straight in the eye. No, I'm finally standing up for myself. Alex joined in, his voice full of anger. You'll regret this. You can't survive without me. But I wasn't afraid of his threats anymore. As days passed, I prepared for the court battle. I gathered financial documents, recorded their hurtful words, and collected evidence of their neglect. One afternoon, as I sorted through my papers, my son came to me. Mom, are we going to be okay? His voice was small and uncertain. I pulled him close, feeling a surge of protectiveness. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new happy life. Just you and me. His arms tightened around me, and in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. I was fighting for my son's future, not just for myself. The day of the court hearing approached, bringing a sense of impending freedom. I was ready to confront Alex and Mrs. Whitmore, to put an end to their control and abuse. I was ready to take back my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it through. The day of the court hearing arrived, a day I had been dreading yet eagerly awaiting. Sitting across from Alex and Mrs. Whitmore in the courtroom, I felt a surreal mix of emotions. This was the moment of change. The proceedings began formally. Alex's lawyer painted him as a devoted husband and father, unfairly accused. Mrs. Whitmore portrayed herself as a grieving mother-in-law, mistreated by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. But their act was transparent, their lies obvious. When it was my turn to speak, I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I have been the only one working to support this family for years. My husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulation have caused constant strain. Alex interrupted, pretending to be hurt. Alara, how can you say these things? I turned to him, my gaze firm. Support isn't just words, Alex. It's about actions, and your actions have been selfish and cruel. The judge listened as I presented my evidence. Financial documents, recordings of their verbal abuse, testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. The truth was clear. As the evidence piled up, Alex's facade crumbled. Mrs. Whitmore's calm demeanor cracked, revealing her true nature. The courtroom fell silent, tension thick in the air. Then came the bombshell that sealed their fate. My lawyer presented evidence, photographs and documents proving Alex's infidelity and Mrs. Whitmore's affair with a neighbor, Mr. Harwood. The courtroom buzzed as the images were shown, revealing their deceit for all to see. Alex paled, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Whitmore's anger twisted her expression, her hands shaking. You violated our privacy, she shrieked, her voice piercing. I met her gaze calmly. No, I exposed the truth, a truth you both tried to hide for too long. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Their credibility crumbled, their lies laid bare. As the hearing ended, the judge's decision was clear. I was granted full custody of our son, and assets were divided fairly. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were left with nothing but their ruined reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt like a burden had been lifted. The years of manipulation and abuse were finally behind me. I had stood up to them and won. But the best moment was when my son ran into my arms outside, his face beaming with relief. We did it, Mom, he said happily. Yes, we did, I replied, hugging him tightly. We're free now. This is just the beginning for us. As we walked away together, I knew this victory wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who's ever felt small or powerless. It was for truth and fairness. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope and a better future. The aftermath of the court ruling was swift and chaotic. News of Alex and Mrs. Whitmore's deceit spread quickly, staining their reputations in our small community. They could no longer hide behind their facade of respectability. In the days after the verdict, I focused on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't ignore the satisfaction of knowing they were facing the consequences. One evening, while preparing dinner, I had an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Harwood, Mr. Harwood's wife, her eyes filled with tears. "Alara, I heard everything. I can't believe what Sylvia, Mrs. Whitmore, did," she said, her voice trembling with pain. I invited her in, offering a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she poured out her heartache. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened, offering comfort. It was clear Mrs. Whitmore's actions had caused more damage than she anticipated. The next day, I ran into Alex in town. He looked defeated, a shadow of his former self, his arrogance gone. I paused, facing him. "What's left to say, Alex?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I relied on you, on your strength." His apology, though belated, marked a shift in power. He had lost everything: his pride, his home, his family. And in that loss, he finally acknowledged his mistakes. But it was Mrs. Whitmore who faced the harshest consequences. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only tarnished her reputation, but also led to legal troubles. Mrs. Harwood had filed for divorce and was suing her for alienation of affection. I heard about Mrs. Whitmore's downfall through whispers and rumors from neighbors, painting a picture of a woman brought down by her own actions. She became an outcast, rejected by those she once called friends. One afternoon, I spotted her at the grocery store, her demeanor defeated as she hurried through the aisles. Our paths crossed, and our eyes met briefly. The resentment and defeat in her gaze were clear. "You did this to me," she muttered as she passed by. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and vindication. "No, Sylvia, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tables had turned, and the consequences of their choices were now unavoidable. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were facing the consequences of their years of deceit and manipulation. As I saw them struggle, I understood that the greatest revenge was living well, free from their toxicity. Refocusing on my son and our new life, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about freedom, breaking away from abuse and control. Looking ahead, I knew the best was yet to come.